My grandmother-in-law's estate is worth $18 million. And everyone in this room knows Sienna doesn't deserve a dime of it. Diane announced this before the attorney had even opened his briefcase, her voice carrying the particular cruelty of someone who'd rehearsed the line in the car. She was my sister-in-law. Technically. In practice, she was the woman who'd spent 9 years finding new ways to remind me I didn't belong. I'm Senna Marlowe. I'm 34 years old. I work as a labor and delivery nurse at a hospital outside Columbus, Ohio. And 3 days before she died, my husband's grandmother pressed a worn leather journal into my hands and whispered something I didn't understand until much later. Wait for the video. Sweetheart, she said, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman who weighed maybe 90 pounds by then. They're going to show you exactly who they are. And then, finally, everyone else will see it too. I didn't know what she meant. I thought it was the medication talking, or maybe just an old woman's way of comforting herself. I was wrong on both counts. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield, though I'd only started calling her grandma the year before. After 8 years of Mrs. Whitfield and careful distance, the kind of distance her family had made very clear I was supposed to maintain. She was the mother of my husband, Derek's father, and for most of my marriage, she'd been a woman I saw at holidays, sitting quietly at the edge of gatherings where nobody thought to include her either. That changed the year I started visiting her on my own. It began small. I'd stop by after a rough shift, just to sit with her for 20 minutes. She'd tell me stories about growing up in Dayton, about the husband she'd loved and lost, about the daughter-in-law, Derek's mother, Carol, who'd never once asked her a single question about her own life in 30 years of marriage into the family. Eleanor was sharp as a blade and twice as funny. And somewhere in those Saturday afternoons, 20 minutes turned into 3 hours, and Mrs. Whitfield turned into Grandma. And I realized I loved this woman fiercely, with no calculation in it at all. Her family didn't seem to notice, or didn't care to. Derek's father, Gerald, visited maybe 4 times a year, always with an agenda. His brother Marcus came even less. Carol, Eleanor's daughter-in-law, treated visits like chores to be minimized. And Diane, Marcus's wife, treated the entire relationship like a transaction she hadn't yet figured out how to collect on. I was the only one who showed up without wanting anything. So when Eleanor passed in her sleep on a quiet Tuesday in March, and the family gathered 2 weeks later in a downtown law office for the reading of her will, I expected an uncomfortable afternoon. I did not expect what actually happened. The conference room at Whitmore and Cole Attorneys at Law was the kind of space designed to intimidate dark wood paneling. Leather chairs, a table long enough to seat 12. Besides Diane and her grabby, manicured hands, the room held my husband Derek, his brother Marcus, their parents Gerald and Carol, and me, the outsider who'd married into this family 9 years earlier and never once been let all the way in. Perhaps we should begin. The attorney started. His name was Walter Higgins, a silver-haired man with the calm patience of someone who had clearly presided over family implosions before. He adjusted his glasses and studied the room like he already knew how this was going to go. "We don't have all day," Gerald interrupted, his voice booming with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Some of us have real jobs to get back to. Real jobs. Unlike mine." Apparently the pediatric and labor nurse who'd worked every other weekend for 5 years and still found time to read to his dying mother while he played golf. "Of course, Mr. Higgins said mildly, opening a leather folder. "However, there are some preliminaries. First, I need to confirm attendance. Is everyone named in the will present?" "Who else would there be?" Carol scoffed, examining her nails. Mother only had 2 sons. "We're all here." "Actually," the attorney said, glancing at his notes, "there's a hospice nurse named Priya Anand listed, and a doctor, Frank Delgado. Her physician. Marcus laughed. Short and dismissive. Grandma left something to hired help, how quaint. How much could it possibly be? Diane's voice pitched higher, sharp with irritation. $1,000 each. Just mail them a check and let's move on to the actual inheritance. Derek squeezed my hand under the table. Not comfort. Warning. The same silent message he'd been sending since we walked in. The same one he'd been sending for 9 years every time his family pretended I wasn't in the room. Before we proceed, Mr. Higgins continued, I'm legally required to ask, has anyone here attempted to access Eleanor Whitfield's accounts or property since her passing? Silence. Then Carol cleared her throat. Well, someone had to start preparing the house for sale. I may have begun organizing a few things. Diane added quickly. You mean you went through her jewelry box? I said. It was the first time I'd spoken since we sat down. Every head turned toward me. Derek's grip tightened until it hurt. Excuse me, Diane's voice could have frozen the room over. Tuesday afternoon, I said, keeping my voice level. You were there with an appraiser. I saw the visitor log when I stopped by to water the orchids. Her sapphire brooch is missing. The one her husband gave her in 1974. How dare you accuse me? I'm not accusing. I said, I'm stating what the security footage shows. You arrived at 214 and left with 2 bags at 350. Gerald's face went a dangerous shade of red. You had no right to check that footage. Actually, Mr. Higgins interjected smoothly. Mrs. Whitfield specifically requested that Sienna retain monitoring access to the property. Shall we proceed with the reading? Finally, Diane muttered. Then, gesturing at me. Though I still don't understand why she's even here. It's not like Mother Whitfield ever really accepted her. She didn't even call her grandma until last year. That part was true. For 8 years, I'd called her Mrs. Whitfield. Respecting a distance her family had made clear was expected of me. Until the day she grabbed my hand at a birthday dinner nobody else attended and said, 8 years is long enough. Sweetheart, call me Grandma. Lord knows, no one else at that table remembered I existed as a person and not a placeholder. The last will and testament of Eleanor Ruth Whitfield. Mr. Higgins began. Executed 7 months ago. Superseding all previous versions. 7 months, Derek sat forward. Her will was updated 7 months ago. Correct. Mrs. Whitfield was quite specific about the timing. He cleared his throat and began, to my son, Gerald. I leave the sum of $1,000, the exact amount you once told me was too expensive to spend on gas money to visit me for Christmas. Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. To my son, Marcus. I leave my late husband's collection of vintage golf clubs. Since you always preferred the golf course to my company while I was dying. This is insulting. Marcus snapped, slamming a hand on the table. To my daughter-in-law, Carol. I leave the costume jewelry from my dresser. Since you were never able to tell the difference between real and fake, a fact well demonstrated by the family you married into. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Eleanor had always been sharp, but I hadn't expected her to be this savage from beyond the grave. To my daughter-in-law, Diane. I leave my complete set of etiquette books. In the hope that you might one day learn that loudly calculating a dying woman's net worth at her own funeral luncheon is considered poor form. Diane's face flushed a deep, furious scarlet. She had, in fact, done exactly that I'd heard her myself. Standing near the buffet table, estimating property values 2 hours after we buried Eleanor. To my grandson, Derek. Mr. Higgins read, and I felt my husband go very still beside me. I leave my disappointment, along with the sincere hope that someday, somehow, you find the courage your family never modeled for you. What Derek's hand went slack around mine. Mr. Higgins continued reading, his voice unwavering. You married a remarkable woman, and then spent 9 years allowing your family to treat her like a stranger at her own dinner table. You canceled visits to see me whenever your mother deemed them inconvenient. You sat in silence while your family dismissed your wife's career, her time, and her worth. For that, you receive precisely what you gave me in my final years, nothing of substance. The room erupted. This is elder abuse. Carol shrieked. She wasn't in her right mind. Gerald snapped. Someone clearly influenced her. He turned and pointed a finger at me. It was her. The nurse. The gold digger. I want this contested immediately, Diane demanded, already reaching for her phone. Mr. Higgins raised a hand for quiet. Please. We're not finished. There's a video component to the will. He turned a laptop toward the room. And suddenly Eleanor was there on the screen, sitting in her favorite wingback chair by the window. Sharp hazel eyes fixed directly on the camera, as though she could see every one of us squirming. Hello, Vulturas, she began. And Marcus actually choked on his own breath. If you're watching this, Eleanor said, her voice steady and clear, it means you've just discovered that your assumptions about my estate were wildly, spectacularly incorrect. Let me be very clear before you say another word. I was of sound mind when I wrote this will. Dr. Delgado confirmed it, as did an independent psychiatric evaluation I underwent specifically to prevent exactly the kind of tantrum I suspect is happening in that room right now. I have copies of every dismissive email, every canceled visit, and every excuse each of you made to avoid spending time with me in the final years of my life. On screen, she smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Gerald, you visited me exactly 5 times in 6 years. Once to ask for a loan to cover Marcus's failed restaurant. Once to convince me to sign power of attorney over to you. And once, when you thought I was asleep, to photograph my financial statements. I was awake. Dear, I've always been a light sleeper. Gerald's purpled face had gone pale as chalk. Marcus, you couldn't drive 15 minutes to see your own grandmother. But you had plenty of time to research my property values online. I know about the real estate agent you brought along under the pretense of a friendly visit. I let her believe I was too far gone to notice. I noticed everything. Turn it off, Marcus said weakly. Carol, Diane, you two couldn't even manage to pretend you cared. The only time either of you showed any interest in me was when you assumed I was too medicated to notice you going through my belongings. Surprise. I noticed that too. And I documented it. Every visit. Every missing item. Every cruel comment you made about Sienna when you thought I wasn't listening. The room had gone dead silent except for the recording. Which brings me, Eleanor continued, to the only person in this family who ever treated me like a human being instead of a bank account waiting to be inherited. I felt my chest tighten. Sienna came every Saturday. Nobody asked her to. In fact, you all mocked her for it behind her back, not realizing I could hear you. She came because she wanted to. She read to me. She brought me tea from the little shop on 5th Street that I liked. She listened to my stories about the old days. About my husband. About the life I lived before any of you were born. She helped me care for my orchids and never once, not a single time in 9 years, asked me about money. Eleanor leaned toward the camera. Sienna, sweetheart, they're going to tell you that I was manipulated. They'll say you influenced a lonely old woman. Let me be crystal clear. For the record. For the lawyers. For anyone who ever doubts it, the only influence you ever had on me was showing me what family is actually supposed to look like. You loved me when there was nothing in it for you. You showed up when it was inconvenient. You saw me, Eleanor. Not a wallet with a pulse. That is worth more than any amount of money I could ever leave behind. Therefore, Mr. Higgins said, taking over as the recording paused, the remainder of the estate, including the primary residence, the lake property in Michigan, all investment accounts, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $18 million, is left in its entirety to Sienna Marlowe, whom Mrs. Whitfield considered her true granddaughter. The explosion was immediate and completely predictable. "I'll sue," Gerald roared, rising halfway out of his chair. "This is fraud," Carol screeched. "You manipulative." Diane lunged across the table toward me, stopped only by the security guard Mr. Higgins had apparently anticipated needing. Derek sat frozen, staring at me like he was seeing me for the very first time in 9 years of marriage. "There's more," Mr. Higgins said calmly, pressing play again. Eleanor reappeared on the screen. "I know you'll try to contest this. That's precisely why I've included a provision. Any family member who challenges this will, in any court, in any capacity, forfeits even the token amounts I've left them. And furthermore, I have documented extensive evidence of financial exploitation. Carol, that includes the sapphire brooch you took last month while I was sedated. It was appraised in 2019 at $52,000. That's grand theft. Dear, not a family keepsake. I've instructed Mr. Higgins to pursue criminal charges should anyone contest this will. I have video evidence, written documentation, and sworn statements from both Dr. Delgado and my hospice nurse regarding the pattern of behavior I endured in my final year." The room had gone tomb silent. "Sienna." Eleanor's voice softened, and even through the screen, I felt it land somewhere deep in my chest. "Use this gift wisely. I know you will. And remember what I told you the last time we spoke. Sometimes the family we choose means more than the family we were born or married into. You chose me when no one else did. Thank you for seeing me as more than a checkbook with a pulse." The video ended. Mr. Higgins closed the laptop gently. "This is Gerald started. Ironclad," the attorney finished. "I've been preparing this for 7 months. Every provision has been reviewed by outside counsel. Every possible challenge has been anticipated. Mrs. Whitfield was extraordinarily thorough. Sienna," Derek finally spoke, his voice cracking. "You knew about this." I shook my head. "I knew she was hurt by how rarely you all visited. I knew it broke her heart. Honestly. But I had no idea about any of this." "Liar." Deanne spat. "Nobody spends that kind of time with a dying woman without expecting something in return. That's the difference between us," I said quietly. "You genuinely cannot imagine caring for someone without expecting a reward for it. I loved Eleanor because she was funny and sharp and had lived an incredible life. I visited because I liked her company. That's all it ever was." "Don't act noble," Carol sneered. "You're just better at playing the long game than the rest of us." I stood, suddenly exhausted by all of it. 9 years of exhaustion catching up to me in a single moment. Believe whatever helps you sleep at night. But while you were calculating her net worth, I was calculating her medication schedule. While you were photographing her jewelry, I was taking pictures of her smiling on her good days. To show her doctors she still had them. I turned to Derek. 9 years. 9 years I waited for you to stand up to them. To tell your mother to stop seating me at the end of the table like hired help. To defend me when they forgot to include me in family photos. Your grandmother saw all of it. Derek. Every single time. And it broke her heart on my behalf. Sienna. Please, Mr. Higgins, I said, turning away from my husband. What are the next steps? I'll begin the estate transfer immediately. It should be finalized within 90 days. The lake house is yours effective today, Mrs. Whitfield was very specific that she wanted you to have somewhere to go. I understood exactly what that meant. Eleanor had known this would end my marriage before I did. As I gathered my purse, Derek grabbed my arm. "You can't seriously be leaving right now." "Actually," I said, gently pulling free. "I am. Your grandmother was right about you. 9 years of choosing them over me. And that's just how my family isn't an excuse anymore." "Derek, it never really was. Now you can have all the peace and quiet with them that you always wanted." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Though I heard Diane screaming something about lawyers and theft and loyalty, the same loyalty none of them had ever shown the woman who raised her husband. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and finally let myself cry. Not for the money. I would have traded every dollar of it for one more Saturday afternoon with Eleanor. For one more cup of tea and one more story about her life before any of us. I cried for the woman who had truly seen me. When her own flesh and blood had spent 9 years pretending I was invisible, my phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number that turned out to belong to Mr. Higgins. "Mrs. Whitfield left a personal letter for you at the house. She said you'd know exactly where to look." I did know. The leather journal was still sitting on my passenger seat. The one she'd pressed into my hands 3 days before she died. Inside the front cover, I found a sealed envelope. "My dearest Sienna, by the time you read this, you'll have met the wolves, and you'll finally understand why I changed my will. They're going to paint you as a villain. We both know the truth. You gave me something worth far more than money. You gave me your time. Your genuine friendship. And 9 years of Saturdays I will treasure for however much longer I get to exist somewhere. In some form. The money is only a tool. Use it to build a life somewhere far away from people who never once valued you the way you deserved. All my love. Your chosen grandma, Eleanor, provided. S. The orchids need watering every Thursday. They're yours now. Dear, like everything else I ever cared about, I know you'll keep them alive." I drove straight to the lake house, my house now, and walked slowly through rooms full of memories Saturday afternoons. Quiet conversations over tea. The particular sound of Eleanor's laugh when she told a story about her late husband trying and failing to dance at their wedding. In the sunroom, her orchids sat in a shaft of afternoon light, blooming brilliantly, completely unaware that their caretaker had changed hands. My phone rang. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. And then I blocked his number. And then, by I blocked the rest of his family too. In the kitchen, I made tea in Eleanor's favorite pot and sat in her chair by the window. Looking out at the garden, we'd always talked about renovating together. The rose beds she'd wanted for years, but never got around to planting. I planted them myself. The following spring. For her. For the woman who had chosen me as her family, when the people who shared her blood had chosen greed instead. $18 million would change my life in every practical sense. But it wasn't the biggest thing Eleanor Whitfield ever gave me. She taught me that real wealth was never measured in dollars. It was measured in quiet Saturday afternoons spent reading poetry to someone who valued your presence more than they valued anything you could give them. It was measured in being seen. Fully. By someone who never once made you feel like a guest in your own life. And that particular inheritance, the kind that teaches you exactly what you're worth, and exactly who deserves a place in your life going forward, was something no lawyer, no family member, and no amount of anger in a downtown conference room could ever take away from me.